We did at that time also hear that we had some buses on the way to the DAO compound. And I was of the opinion that maybe they were going to start ferrying some people from the embassy via bus over to the DAO compound. And I was told, no, those were people, that was only a group of people that were picked up from outlying areas that were coming to the DAO compound.
And I had a list of predetermined sites for pickup. At those sites were going to be embassy officers with their staffs and what we consider to be the highest risk Vietnamese, people that had worked closely with us. And so I filled my 3 buses up, turned around, and went out to the air base. The South Vietnamese guards on Tan Son Nhut Air Force Base were standing literally at the front gate. They had their weapons, the gates were closed. It was clear that they didn't intend to let anyone in. So I got out of the bus and I walked up to the Vietnamese guards. There was an officer in charge of the detail, and I attempted to communicate with him and to tell him what we were trying to do and that we had the authority to do this, that we were still on his side. And he got very angry, increasingly as I spoke to him, until he pulled out his pistol and locked and loaded it, as if to say, if we continue this discussion, I'm going to shoot you. It seemed like a good idea at the time to withdraw, which I did. And I took my convoy and I turned back around and tried to head back into Saigon. What I found was that in the last several hours, anarchy was beginning to take over the city.
I saw many helicopters stop at the American Embassy, and I hope that I still had a confidence that I will be one of those, who will be picked up by the helicopters. But we keep waiting and waiting. Nobody calls, no phone calls, nothing. And then I was trying to make the call to the American Embassy, but the phone was disconnected.
We were very anxious when time lapsed, and we waited for a long time, but nothing happened.
I went to one last stop. And when I got there, I found out there were several hundred employees sitting there in the courtyard. There were no Americans left. And they thought I had come to rescue them. And when I got there, I had to walk through them and look at them. And when they looked at me, they knew that there was no hope. So I started winding my way through the streets, which were completely congested. There were trucks, military trucks with soldiers, partially uniformed with weapons. They were beginning to loot the homes along the streets near the embassy. The embassy, when I got there on foot, was completely surrounded by hundreds, hordes of people clamoring for assistance at the gates. And the Marine Guards on the other side were visibly nervous and anxious, as they should have been. I wormed my way through the mob and got to the gate and told one of the Marines that I was an embassy officer and that I needed him to open the gate for me.
Ambassador Morton, at one point in time, decided that he was going to drive his car out that gate, and I said, hell, we'll never get that gate open. There's too many people.
Watch out, watch out. Get ready to crack the gate. Get ready to crack the gate.
Gunnery Sergeant Slaughter and I went over and we said, okay, we'll try to open the gate. And we tried, and Schlager got locked outside, and I got pulled back inside. When we closed, I went back and I said, Mr. Ambassador, you can't leave. We don't even know who's out there. You know, somebody's liable to take a shot at you. It's just not safe. And he got out of the vehicle and slammed the door and stormed upstairs.
I remember one point a Marine guard helping a woman over, literally dragging her over the wall of the embassy and dropping her child on the other side. And the child was swept away by the crowds on the other side of the embassy wall. She couldn't reach the child.
The ambassador came down later and patted me on the head and said, you're doing a good job, I understand. He said, but I'm going to the residence and I'm going to walk. And I said, holy hell. Now we grab 6 Marines and we say, okay, we'll go out this pedestrian gate out the back, and we'll walk him to the residence. And there are 3 Marines at the residence that are over there, and they're protecting the classified material. Martin had personal files on every important Vietnamese, and he wanted all that stuff destroyed.
Out at sea, the evacuees were beginning to arrive by the hundreds. But suddenly, the panic in Saigon threatened to spread to the ships. Scores of South Vietnamese helicopters appeared, commandeered by pilots and soldiers, desperate to escape. The new arrivals quickly filled the decks, leaving no room for Marine helicopters to operate. There was only one solution. By 5 p.m., the evacuation from both the DAO compound at the airport and the embassy was moving ahead.
And they began coming in about every, 15 or 20 minutes. But if you looked out at the number of people who were leaving and the number of people who were still there, by late in the evening, almost by sundown, very little progress had been made in diminishing that crowd inside the embassy.
We were never able to really say, okay, the count is such and such, and we'll be cutting down from there, because as many we sent out, we got back in, and there were wall jumpers, many people coming over the wall. So the number just, kept fluctuating all day long, and they come down and they'd say, well, how many more? And we say, well, looks like about 2,000. And then they come down another hour and say, well, how many more? Well, still 2,000,
There were rumors that the North Vietnamese had shot down helicopters. There were rumors that the evacuation was ending, that they were all going to be left behind. And our job was to somehow counter this. And the best way we knew how was to circulate amongst the refugees, in my case speaking Vietnamese, with a bullhorn, and essentially reassuring them that we would all go.
It was going slow in the embassy due to the weather and the factors, the physical factors in the embassy. They were bad. They were bad. They had to literally fly down into a tunnel, so to speak, where they only had maybe 25 to 50 feet clearance on their rotor blades. An accident would have been catastrophic. So we had to be careful about that.
On the ships, the evacuees were arriving from the DAO compound as planned, but the situation at the embassy was deteriorating.
I looked down into the street at the front entrance of the embassy, and I realized that a communist agitator was haranguing the crowd and getting them to chant against the United States, against America, against the embassy. And I could surmise what he was saying. Look, they're leaving you, they're abandoning you, they're escaping.
We really had a sort of a daisy chain of helicopters that were constantly coming in, picking up, leaving, discharging on one of the aircraft carriers out there, turning around and coming back.
As evening came, the North Vietnamese circle tightened on Saigon, and the DAO compound at the airport was in danger of being overrun. But the evacuation from there was almost complete.
By about 8 o'clock at night, we had run out of people to evacuate. Out of the DAO compound, it was dark, of course. And so I gathered my staff, and we went out to climb aboard the last helicopter out.